I'm a landscape architect and principal at Smith Group in San Francisco, and part of the Northern California chapter ASLA executive team. And on behalf of the chapter, welcome to today's Lunch with Leaders presentation with Tom Mroz. Just a few housekeeping items since we've all been in isolation for quite some time. If those of you who are not on video could switch to video. We've just heard in the past that people like to be connected and see other people's faces. So if you're willing, put on your video. And for those of you who want, holy mackerel, Glenn Phillips. For those of you who want to know who's on the executive committee, the name has ASLA-NCC after it. So if you have any desires of knowing who that is, you can reach out to us later. And then last, during the whole presentation, if there are any questions throughout, please use the chat function to ask any questions through that, and we'll utilize the chat function to start the Q&A process once Tom is complete. So have you seen in some of the emails and hopefully our social media, this is a new series that we started this past July. And we've got speakers through the end of this year. We've in December, we've got John Lays from Sherwood Design, and we're currently working on the next 6 months and hope to tell you who those people are in December when John speaks. Today, we've got the pleasure of listening to Tom Mroz, and I'm just going to give a brief introduction to him and then turn it over to Tom so that he can discuss his role at ASLA. So Tom Mroz is a fellow of the ASLA and is a senior vice president with Smith Group, and he spent his entire career at Smith Group JJR and Smith Group, starting as a landscape architect, working all the way through the ranks as a senior landscape architect, managing an office, director of operations, project manager, and is currently on the board of our firm and runs our Ann Arbor office. He has a master's in landscape architecture and a master's of business administration, both from the University of Michigan. He's licensed in 20 states and LEED accredited. He's also started and helped the development and the rollout for the Smith Group Diversity and Inclusion Scholarship for the firm, which actually is for all undergraduate students and graduate students apply for that and become an intern with us as part of that. So Tom is now rolling into becoming the next week officially the National ASLA President. And throughout ASLA, he's been on the executive committee and served as the VP of Finance for a few years. And prior to that, Finance and Investment Committee, part of the Audit Committee, and throughout the Michigan chapter as well. He was elected to the ASLA Council of Fellows in 2018. So on behalf of the chapter, please welcome my colleague and friend, Tom Mroz.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, the Audit Committee is like definitely where the action is at ASLA. So. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and see if do that. Okay, so can you hear me okay? Give me thumbs up there, Todd. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, let me close that little box down. Okay. So first off, hello and good afternoon to everyone. As Todd mentioned, my name is Tom Mroz and I'm the incoming ASLA president. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today and discuss what's going on at ASLA and what our priorities are for the year ahead. ASLA is going through a time of change, not only within the society itself, but in coping with a changing world around us. We're looking to forge a new path in the face of challenges such as the climate crisis, racial injustice, and COVID-19 pandemic. So what I'd like to do is just take the first part of this and just review the highlights of 2020. So even though we've spent most of this year sequestered in our homes and other places, ASLA was still able to move forward on a lot of fronts. So I'd like to talk about those first, and then spend the back part of the time just going through what our main priorities will be for 2021. So first and foremost, starting just about a year ago from now, ASLA partnered with Higher Talent, an executive search firm that we selected to find an innovative, strategy-minded leader who would bring a new vision to the society. And I had the good fortune of being part of the 8-person selection committee. And we had input from over 25 stakeholder groups from across the industry, from the ASLA team members in DC to chapters around the country and the membership at large, to leaders in our partnered and allied organization to identify leadership qualities desired in ASLA's next CEO. That resulted in the creation of a prospectus, which then Higher Talent used as a recruiting tool. And through that process, which concluded at the end of August, we found that leader in Tori Carter-Canine. So Tori has a proven track record as an innovator and thought leader in the association world, with an aptitude for pioneering strategies to shape organizational priorities, ensure financial stability, and invigorate member recruitment and retention programs. For us, from the climate crisis to racial injustice to diversity and inclusion, Tori has the strategic vision necessary to tackle the tough issues facing the society, the profession, and the entire design industry. And I can say, with having worked closely with Tori on the XCOM for the last few months since he's arrived, he continues to exceed all of our expectations. So these are the main areas that ASLA put a lot of focus on so far in 2020. The first was climate change. And we started the year by elevating the Climate Action Committee to full committee status in order to directly involve members in organizational decisions about climate change action. Prior to that, it was a subcommittee in the professional practice, under the Professional Practice Committee. ASLA recognizes that mitigation and adaptation measures to help communities adjust to climate change requires collaboration with a wide range of disciplines, and that addressing climate change is inseparable from addressing issues of environmental justice. But these things are all built in layers, and it all started for us back in 2017, is when ASLA on the public front significantly ramped up our public efforts relative to climate change when we released the Smart Policies for a Changing Climate, a report of design strategies and policy recommendations to address climate change and making communities more resilient. Since that time, ASLA staff has worked with the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis to adopt many of these recommendations in their recently released climate policy report. And in 2019, ASLA's Board of Trustees passed a policy on climate change and resilience, which will help to guide the society's work in this critical area. An exhibition in the lobby of the Center for Landscape Architecture in DC features 20 case studies demonstrating how landscape architecture helps communities become more resilient to climate change. And prior to the pandemic, the exhibition was open to the public and frequently visited. Today, ASLA remains laser focused on highlighting landscape architects as leaders in the fight against climate change. The ASLA Center is a showcase for sustainable design excellence through both our LEED Platinum and WELL Silver certification. And again, prior to COVID, was frequently toured by students and educators alike as an education tool. I'd also like to just remind everybody that ASLA's Climate Action website is a portal for many of our climate resilience resources, including reports, case studies, awards, education, news, and advocacy. And the website also is home to numerous resource guides that offer smart planning and design guidelines. I understand the website is difficult to navigate at times, and we're working on a plan to dramatically revamp that in the coming year. But in the meantime, if you just use some of these direct links, like the ASLA.org climate / climate action, it'll take you right to the place you want to go. Currently, the Climate Action Committee is organizing teams of chapter and university program leaders to host a series of regional conversations aimed at addressing climate change issues most pressing to specific regions of the country. So this map shows how the regions have been grouped, and the plan is to develop a broad climate action network along with local action plans. So please join in these conversations and help in developing a climate action network within our membership and beyond. I believe the first regional kickoff is the Southeast Coast. And then also in 2020, ASLA partnered with the Landscape Architecture Foundation, the McHarg Center, the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes, and the Council of Educators in Landscape Architecture by inviting universities, landscape architecture, and other design programs to be part of an historic national event to translate the core principles of the Green New Deal, which are decarbonization, justice, and jobs, into design and planning projects for their respective regions. Participation in the Super Studio is open to graduate and undergraduate programs of landscape architecture, planning, and related fields, as well as professional practices and individuals in these fields. Participants may also build teams and collaborate with other professions or academic programs and disciplines, community organizations, local firms, and other stakeholders. And I believe to date, over 70 academic programs have signed up, along with 30 other either private firms or other partners. So, and there's still a whole semester to go with this. So so far, it looks like this is going to be a tremendous resource. On the advocacy front, last year, our government affairs team in Washington worked with legislators on Capitol Hill to pass legislation that impacts your practices and allows landscape architects more opportunity to expand their practice areas and address climate crisis. Key legislation in 2020 that ASLA had direct involvement in drafting, sponsoring, and advocating for were Living Shorelines Act, the Trees Act, and the Climate Stewardship Act. All of these three are in various stages of moving forward. The signature legislative win for 2020 was the Great American Outdoors Act, which was signed into law in August after passing the Senate in June and the House in July, both by strong bipartisan support. This law combines two of ASLA's longstanding priorities: permanently and fully funding the Land and Water Conservation Fund, also known as LWCF, and helping the National Park Service and other public land agencies address their maintenance backlog. With this funding, landscape architects can help make our public lands more resilient and sustainable, so they can not only survive the ravages of climate change, but also help mitigate the consequences. An easy way that you can participate in ASLA's I Advocate to help with to participate in ASLA's I Advocate network to support state and federal legislation that supports your practices. I would strongly encourage all of you as ASLA members to become more involved in the ASLA I Advocate network. It's a very easy platform to use. Just input your name and the address where you vote and click the send message button, and pre-crafted messages will get sent to your legislative representatives. These do make a difference. The more of us who send in these messages, the more attention our issues get. So please be sure to go to the ASLA advocacy webpage and sign up for I Advocate today. And keep up the good work for all of you who currently participate, and please encourage others to join. Black Lives Matter. ASLA stands in solidarity with Black communities in the fight against racial injustice and police violence against Black people. ASLA continues to critically look at all of our programs and activities to make sure that we taking positive steps to help impact change in landscape architecture. And moving forward, ASLA has deepened our partnership with the Black Landscape Architects Network to create a meaningful, sustainable plan of action to help guide the profession in addressing the wants and needs of Black communities, no matter how much work and time it takes. On the student front, last spring, ASLA announced free student membership. We have since welcomed almost 3,500 students into the society and are excited to still be adding more with each passing month. Our landscape architecture students are energized and demanding change. Change in their university curriculum, change in their profession, change in ASLA, and change in their communities. We have created ASLAlistens.org as a platform for students to elevate their voice, connect with one another, and directly share their ideas with ASLA. Forum topics are decided by the students themselves and currently include racial justice in landscape architecture, climate crisis, and international student immigration challenges. On the licensure front, our ASLA State Government Affairs team works tirelessly to protect your license. As you can see from these maps, threats to remove or weaken landscape architecture licensure over the past few years has increased significantly. This year is no different. Currently, ASLA is tracking 250 legislative bills. The 4 states that are not highlighted here doesn't mean they don't have any issues. It just means this year they were not in legislative session. And ASLA works closely with chapters to defend against these threats so that we can maintain our licenses and continue our fight for issues important to the profession. Of the 250 bills tracked, government affairs staff uses various threats and reform categories to classify the legislation. Generally speaking, at the very top, direct deregulation of landscape architecture is the most serious. I'm happy to report that there were no bills introduced this year that would directly deregulate landscape architecture. Followed by other threats include consumer choice acts, or what we call consumer beware bills, essentially making licensure optional. They allow anyone to practice any profession as long as they disclose to the consumer that they're not licensed. And then there's studies and reviews, which typically are issued by state governors and usually lead to the goal of proposing occupations for deregulation. And then there are right to earn a living bills, and then there are sunset review bills. So as you can see, there are many avenues to attack licensure, which leads to ARPL. And my guess is many of you may not have heard of ARPL. But what we've learned over the past few years is that oftentimes advanced professions were being left out of the legislative discussions, and they were being included in the same vein as other less technical professions. This led to the development of the Alliance for Responsible Professional Licensing, ARPL. ARPL is composed of professional industry groups representing CPAs, architects, landscape architects, engineers, and all of their associated licensing boards. ARPL professionals are highly complex technical professions that impact public health, safety, and welfare. ARPL provides a consistent framework for educating and communicating with legislators and the media on regulatory and licensing issues. Together, these professions banding together give us strength in numbers. So expect to hear more about ARPL and what each chapter can do at the state level in the future. Revision ASLA 2020 is next week, and it's still not too late to sign up. 25 continuing education credits are available, and with this virtual format, you have the opportunity to get all of them. So even when there's concurrent sessions, you can go back later, you have access to the whole conference, you can watch everything and get all the credits. So please visit the virtual event site for the full revision schedule. And I want to put a plug in. We have a fantastic opening keynote session with Majorg Carter and Walter Hood and our new CEO, Tori Carter-Canine. That kicks off on Monday, the 18th. And over 3 days, we'll host 60-minute education sessions for professional development and bite-sized learning opportunities, which include Continue the Conversation, field sessions, inside the LA studio, virtual networking, game changers, an innovative showcase, and of course, the virtual exhibit hall. And we kicked off the festivities this week already with our celebratory events, starting this past Monday, the 9th, and running through tomorrow, the 13th. These events all start at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Attendees will be able to live chat with one another while watching the events. Each event link will be sent to all members via email on the day of the event. These events are free to all members. So now I'd like to jump over and touch on the priorities for 2021. The big lift will be the development of a new strategic plan for ASLA. Similar to the CEO search, the process will be purposeful and inclusive. The goals of the strategic plan is to confirm our purpose, our why, if you will, define our strategies, our what, and guide our actions, our how. To assist us with this process, we brought in a team of outside experts who will work at various stages of the process. Those include the members of a firm called the Raven Group, Beacon Associates, and Chief Outsiders, and each has a unique role to play in the process that I'm going to briefly outline now. Next. The process starts with member research and service utilization. So the purpose of this stage is to connect with the membership, to learn how they see and use the association, to understand why people belong, from the practical side, from an emotional side, and to see what their expectations are for their professional society. And then we'll use this information to help determine key drivers of member satisfaction, aid in identifying and serving member segments and needs, prioritizing activities, services, and resources, and constructing an ASLA brand structure. And then as well, identify opportunities and key needs of holes that need to be filled. And then we'll take all of this information and marry that with the mission to provide foundation for our strategic planning, prioritizing activities, services, and resources, define our brand positioning and communication objectives, and to guide the organization in accountability and activity decisions. So in essence, we utilize things we didn't know to inform how members see our mission and brand, and then use that to develop the strategy and determine the most fruitful path forward. This is somewhat unique in that we're going to take the first between now and April to really understand where we are and do the background work before the true strategic planning piece starts. The actual strategic planning component will start in Q2 of next year and will utilize a human-centered design process. Human-centered design is an approach that believes all problems are best solved by including the people most impacted by the problem at the center of designing the solution. And obviously, this is often not a linear process, but an iterative one. So here's an overview of the timeline for the next year. In Q4, starting with the approval from the Board of Trustees that we received last week, marketing and member assessment is underway. In the first quarter of next year, we're going to have a qualitative and quantitative member research that will be based in social science and statistics. And then followed in Q2 with the initiation of visioning and strategic planning process that will continue through the third quarter with the development of a strategic framework plan. And then in the fourth quarter of next year, if all goes well, we'll finalize and socialize the vision and the strategic plan. And with we're hoping to get final Board of Trustee approval at the annual meeting in Nashville next November. Also, a top priority for 2021 is our federal advocacy. And I'd like to just take 1 minute and walk everybody through kind of the process that we use for this, because takes a few steps. So this process takes place every 2 years. It happens in even numbered years in preparation for the next Congress. So the recommendations made this year will guide ASLA government affairs in dealing with Congress and the administration for the 117th Congress, which spans 2021 to 2022. This process began in this past April 2020, when we sent out the survey to all ASLA members. Once the survey was closed, the results were analyzed by our government affairs staff and with the Government Affairs Advisory Committee. These recommendations were reviewed by the Board of Trustees last week. Any suggested adjustments are being made now. Final approval of the plan will occur from the XCOM in December, just in time for the start of the new Congress on January 3rd. I would like to point out that we had a record number of members participate in the survey this past year. So thank you for all of those who participated and made your voices heard. After reviewing and analyzing the 21 to 2022 federal and state legislative priority survey responses, the Government Affairs Advisory Committee and Government Affairs staff has recommended that ASLA's 2021 to 2022 federal priorities agenda be based around the theme of climate change and resilience, with a focus on equity and environmental justice. This theme and focus will overlay our work in the following broad policy areas: parks and recreation, transportation planning and design, water and stormwater management, and housing and community development. We believe that utilizing this theme and these core issue areas and honing in on specific programs and policies of importance to landscape architects will result in an effective and efficient advocacy program. And of course, we're going to continue our engagement with students. We now have almost 3,500 student members, which is 25% of our total membership. How fabulous is that? As you can see, this group of students is far more diverse than our profession at large, and these students are our future. So we all must do all that we can to engage them and directly pull them into our activities at both the national and chapter levels. To date, we have paired over 250 students with professional members as mentors, and we are implementing some software enhancements that will speed up this process so that every student that wants a professional member will have access to one. So if you're a professional, please sign up to be a mentor. I'm also encouraged by the more than 125 students who volunteered this year to be on a committee for 2021. Thank you for getting involved. There has never been a better time for students to engage with ASLA and help shape our collective future. Career discovery. For 2021, ASLA is going to continue the work to build the pipeline, introduce the field of landscape architecture to the next generation, and continue on the pathway to have our profession mirror the communities where we live and work. Leading this effort and doing a fabulous job for ASLA is Lisa Jennings. but all of us have a role to play. So I ask all of you in the coming year to participate in at least one career discovery event in your local community. Even if it's virtual, please find a way to participate, share the word. Together, we can spread and amplify the word about careers in landscape architecture. When you think about it, there are not many careers where you can simultaneously work on climate crisis and social justice issues. And please, similar to the climate change, if you want more information, the best way to get it directly is if you just go straight to asla.org/DEI, you'll find numerous resources available. And then lastly, Olmsted 2020 is a coalition formed to commemorate the 200th birthday of Frederick Law Olmsted, which occurs in April 2020. This coming April, the coalition will kick off a year-long celebration which will focus on the influence of Olmsted through the lens of today's modern issues, as well as taking a critical and honest look at Olmsted, the imperfect person. Here is a list of the 10 Olmsted 200 coalition partners. And with that, I'm going to stop and open it up for questions and discussions.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was really great. I didn't know that we were doing all of that as a organization. I don't see any questions yet in the chat, but as Krista wrote, if anyone has some, we can certainly unmute, or you can unmute and ask it directly to Tom. We'd appreciate this conversation and utilize this last 15 or so minutes. Maybe to kick it off, Tom, you were talking about, I appreciated the graphs on the amount of people that actually voted this past April. You said it was a record number of people engaging. And then you showed a graph about membership and talked about the students. And that's one thing that our chapter is trying to do and really connect a little bit more. How are we in membership right now? I mean, I know that it ebbs and flows and goes up and down and kind of goes with the economy. And I remember in 2008, you know, a lot of people went into different careers, but how are we doing on membership, and what can we do to help grow from your mind's eye and from the executive team at ASLA?
Well, Todd, we have just over somewhere between 15,000 and 15,500 members right now in total. That includes the approximately 3,500 student members that we have. And there's about 10,500 or so full members, which include fellows and emeritus members. So, and then in between, I don't know the exact math in front of me, but there's some associate members and affiliate members as well. I think the critical element that one of the things we hope to come out of the strategic plan is we're trying to figure out and understand what the members of the future, or what those 3,500 students who we want to engage and become full members and really guide our society forward, what they're looking for from their professional organization. So we're hoping that will come out. We'll get some direction out of that, out of the strategic plan. I know today, most of the young people that I engage with are interested in, they want to have a purpose. They want us to be a purpose-driven organization, not just a place you go, you get some side benefits. And I also know that there is opportunity even among practicing professionals to re-engage. I think by our count, there's about 9,000 licensed landscape architects in the United States who are not members of ASLA. So we're trying to figure out as part of this research process, where they work, what sectors they're in, what their interests are, why they've chosen not to be members, and what we can do to engage them and bring them back into the fold.
Anyone else?
I have a kind of a question. So maybe it's just my latest gripe on projects. So Todd and I were talking about this yesterday, is that it feels like I'm still constantly losing the parking battle. That projects and sites are really driven by parking counts, and clients are very driven by parking and aren't quite connecting the dots that the more surface area that we pave over is affecting climate change and our community and air quality, and that even lost a battle with a client over 4 trees in a parking lot. And that is, even though that's small, that still is affecting our environment. And it seems like a lot of that's driven by, local city and county ordinances. And how do we get these big ideas that, our industry are having to trickle down to affect what's happening at a local ordinance level, so that we as landscape architects have a leg to stand on when we have to do battle with clients over open space?
Well, first off, I can feel your pain. I lost the battle. So my 38 years of experience didn't help me with that battle either. I lost the battle also with 4 trees, 4 big trees on a site that we were doing for a university in Detroit. It was even a worse situation because the battle had nothing to do with an ordinance. It had to do with the maintenance staff not wanting to, constantly do the maintenance required to maintain these trees. But I think the answer to that question really lies with partnering with some of we've had success in partnering with some of our traffic planning and the more progressive traffic planning and other, just doing research that really does utilization studies that try to base it on facts and research that makes the case for kind of the same way, office buildings have taken on this whole workplace of the future thing, where everybody's got smaller individual workstations and bigger common areas to work in, and trying to figure out what that right footprint was. That was driven by occupancy studies, how many people are actually at their desk at any one time, and how does that change over periods of time. So I think, if we can draw on some of that information, or some of that process, I should say, and develop a logical plan and argument, then that's probably how we have to go about approaching it. Unfortunately, once the project is there and you're taking that forward, it's almost too late for that situation, because they're not going to just change the ordinance on the spot. It's almost I think at the chapter level or at the community level or something, team together with other design professionals to go in and make proposed changes to some of these ordinances and regulations that allow for variations depending on the land use, or in some of the more progressive areas you see shared parking, for example. So because there's a business there that's mostly after work hours, that's sharing parking with somebody that's there during the day, so everybody doesn't have to have their own parking. But it is highly variable across the country depending on your local jurisdiction, and it's highly frustrating. I agree with you totally.
A quick comment about the previous question. First of all, you're trying to turn an ocean liner, not a rowboat, and it takes time. My background, undergraduate botany, bachelor's in forestry, urban forest minor, master's in landscape architecture, minored in natural resource economics, and other masters in public administration. Today, I'm an art consultant. I work with monumental scale sculpture, public art, if you will. But I have some real issues with what the profession is doing, and I don't mean to get into a big argument, but jumping on the climate issue that the profession has done concerns me that it's become too political way too quick. I realize that the movements, and I'm going to upset some people probably that are listening, but I think that no one wants to breathe dirty air. No one wants to drink dirty water. But I believe that the profession has jumped far too quickly again into the climate change rather than, I was raised in a era, and you were too, Tom, and a couple of others perhaps, about good stewardship and conservation. Too much of what is going on today is preservation. And, you know, when you preserve a prairie, you end up with a timber. And people don't understand the repercussions of what is happening in the profession. I would encourage the profession to take another look and to slow down a little bit about where they're heading too quickly. Again, I work with LAs all over the United States. We've got projects that I've worked all over the country on. So I work with the profession in all different levels. But I am concerned with the direction that the profession is taking over the climate issue right now. And on the social justice side, you know, why has corporations and why has the professions been ignorant of what is happening in the world? Why didn't we do something about this 30 years ago? All of a sudden it's a big issue and everybody's jumping on it like they are with climate change. But why haven't we done this over time? I don't get what is happening in the country today and why everybody just jumps on it and becomes fashionable. So everybody does it. I'll be quiet. Thank you for your listening to me ramble.
Well, I mean, it strikes me that we live in a society where we only take action when there's a crisis, right? And we've had a climate crisis and we've had a racial injustice crisis in recent years, both that have come to the forefront. So, and as design professionals, just like many organizations in our society at large, that has propelled us maybe now more than ever to step forward at a faster rate. And over the past year, I've gotten some emails and communication from a number of members, a few members, I shouldn't say, it wasn't that many, about this issue. And when I go back and you know, I looked at somebody sent me an article that was published in ASLA magazine. I think it was in 1972 it was published. And it was about a study that was started in 1969 to look at the direction of landscape architecture and all the controversy that went around, like what direction they should be going at that time. So prior to that, the main focus had been on the art of landscape architecture. It was viewed more as an art and a beauty kind of thing. And the focus and the complaint was that we were going to get left behind if we didn't start paying more attention to the science. But that was a big deal. There was a lot of people who didn't think we should go in that direction. And it evolved into the art and science of landscape architecture, which was directly related to stewardship. And, you know, when I went to school in the 80s, in the early 80s, in the landscape architecture program, it was the art and science and landscape architecture, right? I mean, it was that aspect of it. So when I look today, I think this is just another one of those pivotal points where if we're going to stay relevant as a design profession, we have to pivot to the critical issues of our time. And yes, it's still the art, and yes, it's still the science, but it's not just the physical science. It's also the social science and the way that the spaces we design and the processes that we use to do those designs directly impact people. So, and just like it was, whatever, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever that was, there are, there are members of the design profession, there are members in all of our society that, aren't as comfortable with all these discussions. I mean, they're not easy discussions to have, and they're not like short answered problems. But I think if we are going to stay relevant as a profession and thrive into the future, we have to be willing to take these on. So that's just my outlook about it. But again, that's going to be driven a lot. That's one of the reasons we're doing a strategic plan. We get a lot of requests about, ASLA should do this, we should do that, and we have limited resources. So we're trying to figure out now as much what we shouldn't do as what we should do, and what we should really focus our resources on to really be a effective advocate for the profession of landscape architecture. So I'm counting on it. We're going to get a lot of clarity from that. So to that end, I guess this is my request to all of you as members or chapter leaders or whatever your role is in the design world. When you see opportunities to participate in that, part of the outreach that will occur next year will be a statistically social scientist designed member survey, and we're really going to be pushing. I would like, I know all 15,000 people aren't going to respond, but I would still like all 15,000 people to respond, because we need that input to drive us forward. So, and I think that will help just add clarity to the importance of the issues that we have, and and everybody won't agree with those, but at least they'll understand where they came from and how we're moving them forward. So sorry for the long answer.
That's good. It's great dialogue that we should be having.
Yeah, Tom, one of the things that I read about you was that your work style encompasses an analytical approach and a passion for teamwork, with a strong belief that an integrated team can accomplish much more than one individual. How do you plan to bring kind of your professional experience in your practice and this approach with teamwork and analytics into ASLA this year as you're trying to accomplish this very hefty agenda?
Well, I think for me, it all starts with just listening. Like, you're really trying to, have an open mindset, which is, just being open to new ideas and things that you haven't thought of before, or think about them in a different way. And that's why I'm really excited to work with this team of consultants that Tori has brought. These are all people he's worked with before at the last association he worked at. So in my career, I've been through a number of strategic planning efforts. Usually we always hire a consultant to help us. Usually it's one consultant. They all do some part of the process really well, and there's other parts that, they don't do as well. And so he's got an approach where we're hiring people to do 3 different parts that they specialize in. And we're spending a huge amount of time up front just re-questioning. I mean, that's the advantage of having a new person like Tori come in, right? If left to our own devices, we would make too many assumptions about what we think we already know. So we might be starting with the wrong baseline even. And but for me, it's just going to be listening, facilitating, trying to get people to hear each other, and let's just work together. And I will say I'm really excited to get to work with Tori on this. It was Kurt and Roxanne, I don't know if you guys know Roxanne Blackwell and Kurt Millay, the corporate secretary, and Roxanne's the head of government affairs. They were acting CEO jointly for the past year. And, it was operationally, they did a lot of heavy lifting, and the XCOM really got into way more operational things than what we would normally do. So, so now that we've seen the light at the tunnel, it's like, I get the benefit of being the person that gets to ride alongside with Tori as we go through this strategic planning process. So.
I have one question for our attendees today, because you brought up the climate action committees. I've seen a couple different proposals now as far as which district or group that our chapter should fall in. I've seen one proposal where we group with the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, and I've seen another where we are grouped with Colorado, Nevada, Utah, but I haven't seen one where we're grouped with the rest of the state of California. And I'm just curious from those of you practicing, where do you think we should fit in who we're collaborating with more intimately on some of these types of issues?
Is that a question for me, or that's a question for the other?
Yeah, for our audience.
Okay.
I have an opinion, but I'm on the executive board, so you and I can chat later.
You can start the discussion and maybe other people chime in.
Yeah, Jacinta, please.
Hey, Krista, Jacinta McCann here. And Tom, thanks very much for your presentation. It's exciting to hear what's going on with the plan. In respect to how the Northern chapter should be grouped, I can't see any logic that would split Northern and Southern California. And, my instinct would be to get the whole West Coast, north to south, together, and then you can have a debate about some of the other, yes, maybe bring Phoenix in. It's a very close tie to Southern California. Denver and the states to the north, you could debate whether they lean more towards, the Midwest, more towards, Chicago, or however those, but my instinct would be to definitely, I would not separate Northern and Southern California and the West Coast.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I've heard is because those two are some of the larger chapters, they're trying to distribute some of the numbers of people represented in each of those districts. But yeah, it doesn't do any good if you're splitting up the main ideas.
Well, and the importance of the collaboration between Northern and Southern California. I mean, yes, we're a big state, a lot of people, but I think it's really critical to have that practice and cultural connection, and the way things get split up do impact that. So
I'm going to pipe in. I agree also, and also we're dealing with state law, and so you want to collaborate on what you can do to make change, and you can't do it if you're half a state and the other half is talking about something different.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I suspect those maps may not be final. I do think maybe the Climate Action Committee, I think that's the largest committee we have right now at ASLA. So, and as you can imagine, there's not a shortage of people with ideas about how we should organize and what direction we should go. So hopefully, we'll get that figured out in a way that moves forward. I know the big idea was to try to do a deeper dive by region into impacts of climate change that were specific to that region, so that people undergoing the similar impacts would be talking about strategies and ways to deal with those impacts. Because too much of the time so far nationally in our climate change discussions have focused, in my opinion, too much on our East Coastal and Gulf shorelines, and it's just been about flooding, and there's just, it's starting to broaden out, but obviously there's so many more issues depending on what part of the country are on how you're being affected. So, I mean, I learned, for example, from Kevin Graham, who's in Illinois, that his dad he grew up in the termite extermination business, right? And with climate change, the termites that used to only certain species of termite that only went as far as central Illinois, has now made its way to Chicago and is, chewing away on all of these unprotected wooden buildings in the Chicago area. And, it's just all things like that. A lot of it in the Midwest has to do with pests and drought issues. So,
before we wrap up today, we've reached our time, but Tom, do you have any last quote, phrase, final thoughts that you want to share as people's takeaway today?
Well, I guess my final thought would be, if if you're a professional that's established in the industry, consider signing up to be a mentor. Do what you can to encourage and help our students who are trying to get on board during this tough economic time. And if you're a student, I would say sign up for the program to get hooked up with a mentor. Look for opportunities to volunteer and connect, and be part of the solution. It's because we need you, and you are going to determine what the future of landscape architecture and the future of our professional society are tomorrow, based on what you do today. So.
Great. I love that. Well, everybody put your hands together and thank Tom for taking the time to spend with us today before he becomes famous next week. Remember us when you're national president, and we wish you the best of luck with this year and taking everything on. So just let us know. We'll be here and are here to support you in whatever ways you need. So thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that, and I look forward to the opportunity to meet everyone in person sometime in the future. So.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you all in December. Thank you very much.